Welcome to a brand new political discussion-based video. And in this new discussion-based video, this is going to be promoting a ballot proposition that will be on the ballot in the state of California for the November 3rd, 2026 general election. California Proposition 5, Eliminate State Officer Recall Successor Elections Amendment. This would essentially change the recall election. But before we begin in talking about what Proposition 5 would change about the California recall election for state officers and also state legislators, for instance, we have to first understand the current recall election. And as you recall, the most recent recall election the Californian voters voted in was during the 2021 California recall election, where California voters overwhelmingly voted to keep Governor Gavin Newsom in office. And as you see here on the first question, should Governor Gavin Newsom be recalled? Over 61.9% of Californians voted no, and 38.1% of Californians voted yes. And because a majority of California voters, 50% or more of California voters voted no on recall, Newsom stayed in office. But if 50% or more of voters did vote yes to recall Newsom, Newsom would have stepped down. But that didn't happen. And if a majority of voters did vote yes to remove Newsom, then we would move over to the second question. If Newsom is recalled, who should replace him as governor? And the rules of how the second question works is that the candidate with the most votes, or a plurality of the vote, would replace Governor Gavin Newsom. And as you see here, it was Larry Elder. Even though not that many people who voted in the recall election voted in the second question. A lot of California voters in the 2021 California recall election pretty much skipped the second question. Only 7,351,803 voters voted for a replacement candidate. And on the first question, over 12,838,565 million voters voted only on the first question. So not that many people voted on the second question. And so in that regard, not that many voters voted on the second question, and then chose pretty much chose to only vote no on the first question and leave the second question blank. So that's one of the reasons why you kind of saw an unrepresentative result on the second question, because not that many California voters voted on the second question, pretty much. So to explain the current process again, so how the current recall election process works is that voters have essentially two votes on the recall election. The first question is a simple yes or no vote, meaning should this state executive officer or state legislator be recalled? And if more than 50% of voters vote yes, then that office holder will step down from their position, and the replacement candidate would essentially so if a state executive officer, or if a majority of voters, 50% or more, vote yes to recall this state executive officer or state legislator from office, then that office holder will step down from their post. And then we move over to the second question, where who should replace that office holder. And a candidate with a plurality of the vote, so he doesn't have to get 50%, meaning that he can get either 48%, 38%, 28%, 18% of the vote. As long as he has the most votes, he would be the successor in the recall election. So how does this? So now, since we understand how the current recall election works, where California voters have two questions. The first question is a simple yes or no question, whether this office holder should be removed from office. And the second question is who should replace him. How does Prop 5 change the current recall election process? Proposition 5 changes this process because it eliminates the simultaneous election of a successor when a state officer is recalled, thereby leaving the office vacant until it is filled according to state law. Allow the recalled officer to run again for the same office at the special election if one is held, and authorize the lieutenant governor to fill a gubernatorial vacancy until the expired term, unless the vacancy occurs before the close of the nomination period for the next statewide election during the first 2 years of the governor's term. Then a special election would be called and the winner would serve the remainder of the term. So essentially what this would essentially do is that the amendment would eliminate the election to pick a successor at the time of the recall election, meaning it would essentially eliminate this question here. If Newsom is recalled, who should replace him as governor? It would essentially eliminate the second question. It would eliminate the option for voters who should replace him in case if a majority of voters vote yes on the first question to remove. So Prop 5 would change the recall structure by only having just one question, which is a simple yes or no, which is just having a simple yes or no question. If a majority vote no on the first question, then the office holder must step down and the office becomes vacant. Or if a majority of voters vote yes to remove, if a majority vote no to recall, then the office holder is simply remains in office. So that's a little bit how Prop 5 would change the current recall election process. It would essentially limit the recall ballot to just one yes or no question. Should an elected official be recalled from office? So here, going even a little bit further, how this changes the California Constitution. This ballot measure would amend Section 15 and 17 of Article 2 and Section 10 of Article 5. And I will be going through how these changes would affect how this ballot measure would amend these sections in the California Constitution. So let's first begin on talking about the changes of Article 2, Section 15. The crossed out section, or the crossed out, this section is the original text, and that's the part they want to strike out. These new added sections is the changes that they want to make to the recall election. An election to determine whether to recall an officer shall be called by the governor and held not less than 60 days nor more than 80 days from the date of certification of sufficient signatures. A recall election may be conducted within 180 days from the date of certification of sufficient signatures in order that the election may be consolidated with the next regularly scheduled election occurring wholly or partially within the same jurisdiction in which the recall election is held. If the number of voters eligible to vote at the next regularly scheduled election equal at least 50% of all the voters eligible to vote at the recall election. If the majority vote on the question is to recall, the officer is removed and the officer shall be vacant. The vacancy shall be filled in accordance with this Constitution and statute, provided that the officer who was the subject of the recall election shall not be appointed to fill the vacancy in that office. So that's the change this ballot measure would make to Section 15 of Article 2 of California's Constitution. And this is the change that they would make to Section 17. If recall of the governor or secretary of state is initiated, the recall duties of that office shall be performed by the secretary of state or controller, respectively. If recalls of the governor and secretary of state are initiated at the same time, the recall duties of both offices shall be performed by the controller. So, if the governor or secretary of state is facing a recall, the recall duties would be either performed by the secretary of state or controller, respectively. But if the governor and secretary of state are both facing a recall at the same time, the recall duties of both offices shall be performed by the controller. And that's a change. That's what this ballot measure would do in terms of Section 17 of Article 2 of the state constitution. And now the final section, Article 5, Section 10. Several of the changes. This is the big one of how of who fills the vacancy if a majority vote yes on the first question to remove an executive officer. A. The lieutenant governor shall become governor when a vacancy occurs in the office of governor. Notwithstanding subdivision C of Section 15 of Article 2, if the governor is removed from office by recall, the lieutenant governor shall become governor for the remainder of the unexpired term. If the governor is removed from office by recall before the close of the nomination period for the next statewide election, during the first 2 years of the governor's term, a special election shall be called to replace the governor and shall be consolidated with the statewide primary election, and if necessary, the subsequent statewide general election. If a candidate receives a majority of the votes in the special election that is consolidated with the statewide primary election, that candidate shall become governor for the remainder of the unexpired term. If no candidate receives a majority of the votes, the top 2 vote getters shall compete in a special election consolidated with the subsequent statewide general election, and the winner of that election shall become governor for the remainder of the unexpired term. The lieutenant governor shall act as governor during the impeachment, absence from the state, or other temporary disability of the governor or of a governor-elect who fails to take office. The legislature shall provide an order of precedence after the lieutenant governor for succession to the office of governor and for the temporary exercise of the governor's function. The Supreme Court has exclusive jurisdiction to determine all questions arising under this section. standing to raise questions of vacancy or temporary disability is vested exclusively in a body provided by statute. So the main thing that Proposition 5 would change about the recall election process is that it would simply get rid of the second question. Get rid of the second question on who should replace him if a majority vote yes. If a majority of voters vote in favor of recall on question 1. And you would simply have so this would be, if Prop 5 passes, this would be the only question that California voters would have to vote on, a simple yes or no on either a simple yes or no if this office holder is removed or if he shouldn't be removed from office. And if he is removed, and if he's not removed, he simply remains in office. But if he is removed from office, then a vacancy occurs, and that vacancy will be filled in accordance to state law. So either the lieutenant governor takes over as governor, or if that recall election is close to a statewide, or if the lieutenant governor, or if the recall is held before the nominating deadline for the next statewide election during the first 2 years of the governor's term, then a special election shall be called and held at the same time during the next primary election. During the next primary election, and if a majority of voters vote, and if a candidate in that primary election, in the special election, if a candidate in the special election votes how do I put it? If a candidate receives a majority of votes in the special election, then he simply serves the remainder of the term left over. Simply serves the remainder of the term left over. And one thing that Prop 5 does is that it allows the recalled officer who was removed from office by the first question to essentially run again for the same office at the special election. And if a majority of voters vote for him, he gets his job back again. And that's essentially what this recall election would that's essentially what Prop 5 would do. Just have a simple question, a simple yes or no question. Should an elected official be recalled from office? And now before I share my opinion on where I stand on Proposition 5, let's go into who supports and opposes this ballot proposition. The supporters of Prop 5 are Senator Josh Newman, State Assembly Member Isaac Bryan, Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis, Secretary of State Shirley Weber, the California Democratic Party, of course, the California Common Cause Organization, and the League of Women Voters of California. These people and these organizations support Prop 5. They support Prop 5. Some of the arguments that they make, the League of Women Voters of California and California Common Cause both said in a joint statement, under current law, an off-cycle special election may be held for a recall in which voters are presented with two questions: whether an officer should be recalled and who should replace the office holder. While the first question requires a majority vote to remove the elected official, the second question allows a replacement candidate to be chosen by a slim plurality. Our state's most important leaders can therefore be picked at low turnout elections with non-representative electorates. And replacements can be put into office with low plurality support. rather than a majority of voters in the election. Furthermore, voters have expressed deep confusion as to whether they are permitted to vote for a replacement candidate if they vote no on the first question. The perplexing system can cause people to refrain from answering the second question, thereby disenfranchising voters and contributing to an undervote for replacement candidates. SCA 1 or Prop 5 would retain access to the recall, but in a way that should ensure recall outcomes are democratic and broadly supported and will help to eliminate recalls that are frivolous or degrade democratic legitimacy. This also aligns with State Senator Josh Newman, who was also recalled back in 2018 due to some of his constituents' anger after he voted to raise the state's gas tax, and he was removed back in 2018 with 58% of voters voting to essentially remove him from office. But he also points out that he still had 42% of voters supporting him. And the person who replaced him in the recall was Republican Lin Chang. But here's the catch: Lin Chang only received 34% of the vote, and he believes that a candidate, and he believes that since the second question doesn't require a majority, but only requires a plurality to replace someone, he believes that it's not sustainable. He believes that it is not sustainable, and also that he believes that it's not sustainable, which is why he's leading the charge to pass Proposition 5, because he believes the current recall system offers bad actors an incentive to target an elected official with whom they disagree and to have the official replaced by someone who otherwise would not enjoy the support of a majority of voters. Which is the perfect example of this is Josh Newman's recall in 2018, when 58% of voters in his Orange County district voted to recall him, and the person that replaced Newman in the state Senate was Lin Chang, who only received 34% of the vote. So he believes that the person who would replace an office holder should also be the replacement candidate. Should also be required to enjoy the support of a majority of voters. He thinks that if Prop 5 passes, he thinks this upgrade to the recall election would strengthen democracy and produce fairer results where a majority of voters are heard, and to ensure that a candidate who replaces an office holder has the support of a majority of voters in either the state or a legislative district, for instance. And that's several of the reasons why that's a perfect example why some people are supporting Proposition 5. It's simply to strengthen majority rule and to ensure that the person who replaces an office holder has the support of a majority of voters. But like all other issues, there's always an opposition. The people leading the opposition to Proposition 5 is Election Integrity Project California and Reform California. Election Integrity Project California, on the rare occasion when a recall of a sitting state governor is qualified. It is the people's right not only to vote to oust the person in question, but to choose a replacement. The lieutenant governor is almost always on the same partisan and ideological page as the governor, and as such would be just as unacceptable to the citizenry as the person they are firing. The proposal of Prop 5 or SEA 1 that the lieutenant governor simply assumes the governorship in the event of a successful recall would make gubernatorial recall effort a frying pan versus the fire situation, and monumentally suppress not only the people's right to self-govern, but their eagerness to participate in government at all. Every step should be taken to encourage full participation of all eligible voters in making the decisions and choices that affect their lives and keep our republic not only strong, but also responsive to its constituents. SEA 1 is definitely a step in the wrong direction. So what they're basically saying here is that, what the Election Integrity Project California is essentially saying is, just simply having the lieutenant governor take over the office of governor if a successful recall election to simply assume the governorship in the event of a successful recall, it's just a frying pan versus a fire situation, which ultimately suppresses the people's right to self-govern themselves, and because the argument that they make is that the lieutenant governor is pretty much always on the same partisan and ideological page as the governor. And they are right in that regard, in part because currently we only have a Democratic governor and a Democratic lieutenant governor. But the supporters on Prop 5 are also right, because while the first yes or no question requires a majority of voters to either remove them or vote against the recall, while the first question requires a majority of voters to vote yes to remove a state executive officer or state legislator, that majority vote threshold is not required on the second question. On who should replace that office holder if a majority of voters vote yes on the first question. So supporters believe that Proposition 5 would ensure that the replacement candidate has the support of a majority of voters. And I think another argument that they make is that with fewer recall elections, it would save the state money. And on top of that, this actually goes back to what critics point out with Proposition 5 is that just simply limiting the recall election to just one yes or no question, where let's say if a majority of voters voted yes to recall an executive officer, then the vacancy would be filled in accordance to state law, meaning either the lieutenant governor takes over, or if it's close to the next statewide nominating period, where if it's close to the next statewide nominating period, a special election would be called. A special election would take place on the statewide nominating period. So it would take place consolidated with a primary election. And if a candidate receives a majority of votes in that special election, then he would serve the remainder of that term. And that, in my opinion, could make special elections expensive, but consolidating that with a regularly scheduled election would make things cheaper, and ultimately save money in the long run. So overall, what is my overall opinion? Well, what is my overall opinion on Proposition 5? I think realistically, I think both sides are right. I am I think both supporters and opposition to Prop 5 are both right and wrong. The one area that I believe, where I think the supporters of Prop 5 are correct on is that is that is that a majority vote requirement is not a majority vote threshold is not required on the second question, because whoever under the current recall form, whoever replaces a state officer or state legislator, he doesn't. The replacement candidate on the second question doesn't need majority support. All he needs is to get a plurality to vote, like what Larry Elder did in 2021, where he got 48.5% of the vote, and Ling Chang also receiving 34% of the vote in that Orange County district. So supporters are right to strengthen the principle of majority rule to ensure that whoever replaces the office holder that is recalled also has the support of a majority of voters. But the one area that they are wrong on is in my opinion, authorizing the lieutenant governor to fill a gubernatorial vacancy until the expired term. Because, like it or not, the lieutenant governor currently is still is still part of the same party as the governor. So nothing would really change if you just allow the lieutenant governor to simply take over. Because, like it or not, currently we have a Democratic lieutenant governor and a Democratic governor. So just having the lieutenant governor take over the governor's vacancy, to take over as governor, if a majority of voters vote yes to remove the current governor, would essentially mean nothing would really change, and it would disenfranchise voters, which is one of the areas where the opposition toward the people behind which is one of the areas where the opponents of Prop 5 are right on, is that it would essentially take away the people's right to self-govern themselves, where they can have the right to vote to oust the person in question, but to also choose a replacement candidate at the same time. But both sides are right and wrong. And personally, in my opinion, I am strongly against Proposition 5. Mainly because I don't think this is the right solution. I don't think this is the right solution to reform the California recall election process. Listen, no system is perfect, but I'm just against it. I think a better reform proposal to the California recall election will simply is to simply get rid of the yes or no question. Just simply get rid of the yes or no question and allow the incumbent state officer or incumbent state legislator who is facing a recall election, allow him to run directly with the other candidates vying to replace him. Allow him to run directly with the other candidates, similar to how the state of Wisconsin does their recall election. Most recently, in the 2012 Wisconsin gubernatorial recall election, where Scott Walker survived a recall, he was allowed to run directly as a candidate with the other candidates, which would be Democratic candidate Tom Barrett, and also an independent candidate, Harry Trivetti. I could be pronouncing that wrong, but I think that would be a better reform proposal to reform the recall election, which is why which is why I'm against Proposition 5. Because I don't think I don't think Prop 5 is the right solution, in my opinion, to fix the recall election. So, because I believe the better proposal to reform the recall election is simply get rid of the yes or no question, and just have the only question and just have the only question be who should fill the office, who should either fill the office as governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, or who should fill the office to represent a particular, or who should fill the office to represent these groups of people in the state senate or the state assembly. Allow the incumbent to simply run directly with the other candidates. I think that's a better reform proposal. Which would ultimately make the election process a lot simpler and give voters both the opportunity to recall someone and to also choose a replacement candidate simultaneously. And if we're really concerned about a candidate who replaces someone with a plurality to vote, you can simply have ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, or you can also have ranked robin, contingent voting, and star voting to ensure that the person who's elected in a recall election has the support of a majority of voters. But overall, you guys, I strongly urge you to vote no on Proposition 5 because I believe this is not the right solution. I still like the system where we still have where we can have where voters can choose to remove someone and also choose a replacement candidate simultaneously. Which is why I urge you to vote no on Prop 5. A better reform proposal is to do what Wisconsin does. Allow the incumbent office holder who is facing a recall to also run directly with the other candidates vying to replace him. And allow for ranked choice voting, star voting, contingent voting, and so forth, and other voting methods, and other single winner voting methods to ensure that the candidate who wins the recall election has the support of a majority of voters. But overall, you guys, share your opinions in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree with me? Share your opinions in the comment section below. But please be respectful to those who disagree with you, or agree with your opinions. Who agree or disagree with your opinions. But until next time, guys, this is the Young Centrist, and I am out.